On behalf of the House Democratic Caucus, I want to thank you all for being here this Thursday afternoon as we wrap up another legislative session. There's a couple of issues that I want to touch on. I'd be happy to answer any questions. First and foremost, our caucus has been disappointed in the political games that have been played with several pieces of legislation just this past week. A week or so ago, the governor decided she was going to veto what we believe are important pieces of legislation that received overwhelming bipartisan support. Things like ensuring that surviving spouses of veterans can have a tax exemption card, and making sure that parents of newborn children understand the necessity of certain vaccines that are life-saving vaccines. These things that are important enough that almost everybody in the legislature voted for, but then the governor decided to veto it. Well, when we had the opportunity to run an override and say, let's just let these bills stand on their merits, let's not play political games with them, House Republicans decided to stand with the governor and continue the political games, ensuring that good legislation, that good solid legislation that would help infant children and help surviving spouses of veterans, those House Republicans made sure that those things won't become law. They've turned around and said, well, we may find another vehicle to stick that language in. And our point there is, well, if the governor has somehow quietly agreed to sign their legislation in another bill, then the real issue is, why did she veto it in the first place? If she did not have any objections to it on its merits, on the face of the bill, and therefore she's willing to sign it in another piece of legislation, then it's clear the governor is only playing games with the legislative process. And I don't believe the people of Oklahoma pay her salary to come up here and play those types of games. And so nor do they pay the legislators in the Republican majority salary to play those types of games. And we've been rather frustrated by the process. And we're hoping that as we bring those vetoes back next week, you'll probably see the veto override attempt again on the surviving spouses issue. We think that's important. We have communicated with other veterans groups, the VFW and American Legion, and those folks. They are not happy with the governor's decision, nor are they happy with the House Republican majority's actions. So we're going to give them a chance to rectify that, and we'll probably do that again sometime next week. The other big issue of the day right now is the budget. We've yet to hear what any real numbers look like. I spoke with the Speaker today and asked how things were coming along. He said they were moving along as planned, but they weren't done yet. From our perspective, we're looking at a budget process that should hopefully reinvest in core functions of government: healthcare, public safety, and transportation, and education. You look at what those entities need. The Healthcare Authority needs $90 million. If they don't receive $90 million, any cut to the Healthcare Authority will directly affect senior citizens in the state of Oklahoma, whether through nursing homes or through the care that they receive. And so if this Republican majority doesn't find $90 million to help the Healthcare Authority, then senior citizens in the state will suffer. The higher education needs $30 million, and just to make up for their fixed cost. That's not putting one new dollar to help lower tuition or to help create another program on any of our higher education institutions, but they need at least $30 million. Anything below $30 million would serve as another net cut to higher education, which would only ensure that tuition increases under this Republican governor's watch. Third, common education needs a minimum of $57 to $60 million for health care costs. They need another $24 to $25 million for ad valorem reimbursement, which is just money that we owed them last year anyway. The total runs out to between $100 million to $120 million just to keep common education whole so that they don't take any cuts. When you put all of those things together, and you look at it through the lens of a $260 million tax cut that the Republicans passed a few weeks ago before they even knew what this budget would look like, what we see here is just a record of fiscal irresponsibility. And we think that when the budget's finally rolled out, there's going to be a lot of House Republicans who voted for that tax cut that will regret that vote when they have to then turn around and go back home to their constituents and say that education or health care or nursing homes or public safety took a cut because of their fiscal mismanagement. Well, I'm surprised, but pleasantly surprised. I thought for the longest time that the Senate would stand with the governor in opposing what we believe was good common sense legislation. So we're encouraged that at least on one particular bill, the Senate Republicans decided to take the right stand and stand on their own principles instead of standing with partisan political games. I think it probably has more to do with the issue of behind the legislation. I think the fact that it was a Second Amendment issue and that it's a there's bipartisan support not only in the legislature but just statewide in terms of standing for Oklahoma's Second Amendment rights. And for her to veto a bill that the National Rifle Association, the Oklahoma Second Amendment Association, and others supported. To do that was bold or foolish, however you want to look at it. Well, from our perspective, we believe it's good legislation. It would ensure, it's basically requiring our local county sheriffs to get information back to those individuals as law-abiding citizens who are trying to get access to a Self-Defense Act card. That's what that's about. We think it makes sense. The governor, after vetoing it, came back out and said, well, I didn't know it was a Second Amendment issue. I didn't know it was an NRA bill, although we had information that said otherwise, that maybe somebody from the National Rifle Association had actually spoken with a member of the governor's staff the week before she actually vetoed it. And so at the end of the day, I think the Senate just faced enough pressure and said that when it comes to Second Amendment issues, it's almost like the third rail of politics in the state of Oklahoma, that they'd rather stand with their constituents than stand with the governor on that veto.